Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi there. Thank you so much for being here with me today for my conversation with the wonderful Jill Breitner. Jill is a dog trainer, an author, and the creator of the incredibly helpful and popular Dog Decoder App. The Dog Decoder App helps pet parents and pet professionals to better understand canine body language and thereby better understand what dogs are trying to communicate to us. And ultimately, this helps us to create better bonds with our furry companions with relationships based on trust and understanding. Although Jill has been professionally training dogs for over 40 years, her work in this field really began in her childhood, when she became keenly aware of the profound relationship that exists between humans and animals. During Jill's time working as a veterinary technician, her natural empathy and sensitivity allowed her to support dogs who were so fearful and aggressive that they wouldn't let anyone else handle them. When you listen to Jill speak, you'll understand exactly why she was the perfect person to help support these dogs and why they trusted her. She truly has a gift. In this episode, we cover a range of topics, from Jill's journey into working with dogs, which started with learning about Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees, and then through her personal relationship with her childhood dog, Shotzi. We also talk about shifting the paradigm in dog training, as well as Jill's own health journey with a cancer diagnosis, and how she navigated this through a food as medicine approach for her and then for her dogs. We also talk about connecting the dots to find your own voice, your own agency, and becoming an advocate for your dog and for yourself. And we talk about behavior as a function of an emotion and how you can start understanding what your dog's behaviors are showing you. Jill shares some really helpful ways to better understand your dog's behavior and how to truly listen to your dog. This is a beautiful conversation, and I know you're going to love Jill as much as I do. Now, before we dive in, just a quick note that this episode is sponsored by Aspirationary, which in full transparency is another project of mine where we create books, notebooks, and stationery to support you in becoming all you aspire to be. I'm really excited to announce that we have released a Spanish language version of our popular My First Period tracker for young girls and tweens in order to increase menstrual literacy and empower young people to become advocates for their menstrual health. You can learn more about our books on our Instagram, which is Aspirationary, spelled Aspirationery. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for coming on the Mystic Dog Mama podcast with me today. I am beyond thrilled that you're here with me.
And I am thrilled that you're doing the work that you're doing. So I appreciate you reaching out. We need to help people and their dogs.
We do. And I am so grateful for your work as well. We were just chatting before we started recording about just this lovely synergy that's happening right now of the kind of work that you and I are trying to do and others are trying to do. I really do feel like there's this momentum that's really building around helping pet parents to not be so afraid to find their own voice, to become the advocates for their dogs that they want to be by putting these puzzle pieces together that we've often been told are separate and to think of quite separately and to think of in a particular way. Like there is one way to do any one of these things we're going to be talking about. But in reality, everything is connected, and we have to look at the dog as a whole dog. And it's an invitation to look at ourselves as whole people as well. And I think that's a beautiful mirroring that's going on right now. And I'm so excited to dive into all things dog with you today.
Oh, good.
Just to give the listeners a little bit of a background on why I wanted to speak with you was I've been having quite a few people get in touch about exactly this thing that I'm mentioning about putting the puzzle pieces together and a lot of behavior issues, a lot of reactivity issues. And I'm always a big advocate for actually, we need to look at the relationship that we're building with our dogs. And so it's in a sense inviting us to take a little bit of a step backwards. But one of the things that I feel that people often struggle with is actually reading their dog's body language, actually understanding. They want to communicate with their dogs. And I do animal communication, and they think like is that do I need to go down that route? And when in reality, our dogs are talking to us all
Oh,
of the time. And you do such great work around highlighting this for people. So I wanted to bring you on to talk about that, but also how you're putting understanding the way that our dogs are communicating with us in that bigger picture of the relationship that we want to create with our dogs. So that's what I was really excited about is bringing that full circle together.
okay.
Yeah, lots of stuff in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, would you mind sharing a little bit of your journey into how you got into working with dogs in the first place?
Sure. So I was 9 years old, playing in the street on Long Island with my friends, and this dog trotted down the street, and like a maybe 15, 20 pound dog. And I knew my mother would not let us have a dog. There was an empty lot across the street, and we lived on a canal on the water. And I tied her to a tree, and I just brought food out to her that, that we were being fed. And I did that for 2 weeks, and let her off the leash, and she played with us. And then and we were in a safe place. Tying her to a tree on Long Island is, there's no bears, there's no rattlesnakes. She was safe there, and I have made a little bed, but it wasn't obviously ideal, right? And so my brother found out, and he told my mother, and she said no, 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 and I said yes, 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 and we kept her. And then we moved, my parents divorced, and we moved to California. And Shotzi, I named her Shotzi. And I came home from school one day and she wasn't there. So we moved from a 5 bedroom, 3 story house on the water. Parents divorced. We moved, three of us, 3 kids, moved to a 2 bedroom apartment in California. No yard, no water, no play, no streets to play in. And she was destroying the house. And she had lived with us for 2 years by the time we moved, and never had any separation anxiety or anything. And my mother had my brother bring her when I was at school to the shelter we called it the Pound at that time, and they put her down. So I said, no, we got to go get her. We got to go get her. And Michael said, no, we can't. We can't. And, my brother was so upset that he had to do it. And he cries to this day, 76, about it. And so that was the beginning of me realizing that dogs behave and react to the environment the same way we do. Not the same way, but with energy that says, what, we lived here and now we live here and you're not here, and I don't know what to do with myself. And so she destroyed the house. And that was the beginning of my wanting to understand dogs better. But the real beginning was Jane Goodall. When I read about her and what she was doing with chimps, I did the same thing with horses and dogs. I just sat in the barn. I just watched dogs. I watched Shotzi, and I learned about how they move and breathe in the world. And I never understood why people wanted them to be different than they were. And so when I was 17, I went to UC Davis to meet with the dean to talk about becoming an equine practitioner, a horse vet. And this was in 1972. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be an equine practitioner. He said, oh, honey, you're a woman. You can't do that. And that was the case at the time. There were no women vets, maybe one. And so I became a vet tech instead, and thought, if I want to pursue veterinary medicine after I become a vet tech, nothing's going to stop me. And that's where I really learned about dogs. So as a young, I was now, 18, 19 years old, and go in working with dogs and cats. And my radiology teacher, I ended up working for him when I got out of school. And because he watched me for 2 years in school, and said, there's something about you that dogs just melt in your arms, even if they're afraid or they're aggressive. And so after a year, he said, no one's been bitten. And I've always sent some staff member to the ER room for a dog bite, and at least once a month. And he said, that hasn't happened since you've been here. Get out, go work with people and dogs. And so I did. That was in 1978.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
What
I,
a level. Go ahead.
I didn't understand what he meant. He said, "You have a gift." And I said, "What do you mean? How can anybody not see this? This dog's afraid. He's not mean. He's afraid. And so let me have him for a little while and then we can work on him." Like, it made no sense to me that this was something that most people, that everybody that has a dog didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. But don't you think it's often that way with the gifts that we have? It's just because it's innate, we don't necessarily see it. We assume everybody has that. But what a level of insight that he had to recognize that actually and to give you that permission to explore that for yourself in a different context. That's amazing.
I'm so grateful for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you then become aware once he kind of pointed it out that this isn't necessarily normal for everybody, that this is something that people need to learn to tap back into? Because I would say that we all actually have that capacity, but we're just not necessarily made aware of it and until somebody helps us with that. Do you feel like was there a kind of support structure for you starting to explore that for yourself when you kind of went into working with dogs and people outside of the vet context?
Um, I think that I had that initial awareness of something bigger than me, um, because of my mother.
Hmm.
She did all these weird things that were considered weird at the time, that were more about finding out, not, it didn't have to be a linear path. And so when I realized that it wasn't a natural thing for people, I went to a dog training school. It was 8 weeks and I quit after 3, thinking this isn't what I want to do with dogs. I don't want to teach them sit, stay, coming down and use a choke chain. But there were no harnesses at the time when I started training. They didn't make decent harnesses. So I didn't like the choke chain. So I got the nylon choke chain because I didn't want the dog to get out of the collar, right? But I didn't like the metal and I didn't like the choke at all. But how do I keep a dog from trying to get out of the collar from me or their owner, right? How do you do that? So I did use that for a long time. And I did correct a dog. That it's not only that I knew I had some kind of a gift, but when I was teaching people and I realized what they wanted and that everybody wanted a quick fix, it's like you can't, there is no such thing as a quick fix. And so I started to read, the only book out at the time was the Keeler Method. I don't know if you're even familiar with that. So I read that and I thought, that's not really what I want to do, but how do I do this? How do I help people with the dog is jumping on the kitchen counter on top of the refrigerator? So I just I kind of did both. I kind of like, no, you can't do that. I would correct a dog. I never shocked. I never used a prong collar, but I did correct a dog. But I didn't have to do that with mine. And so part of this whole piece of the puzzle for me was bringing people on board, that it's not going to be a quick fix, and to shift that paradigm, that the dominance theory that is still prevalent today. And so in my work, it wasn't, so I have a gift with dogs, great, but that's not going to make a difference for a client and their dog in the beginning. So 46 years ago, how do I make that connection? And it took a long time for me to work that out with people and to not be afraid to say, there's no magic pill.
Hmm.
I'm not going to give you a magic pill. And why do you think that a dog needs to do this, 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 and this? How can we help this different species live in a human dominated world from the bottom up? Meaning something that I didn't tell you, I got cancer and I was told I had 2 years to live, and that was in 1976. And so I went to UCLA and I got a second opinion at USC, and I didn't do what they said. I had just seen my aunt and her daughter, my cousin, die of the same cancer I had over a 3-year period. And they did all the things that the oncologist told them to do. And I didn't. I said, well, if I'm going to die, I feel like this, I'm going to die and do what I need to do. And I never did chemo. I never did radiation. I had this thing removed from my leg, and that was the end of it. So I think when I started to be curious about food, I went into this, at the time, was macrobiotics. That was the thing that was really big. I worked with a nutritionist. I worked with an Ayurvedic specialist. So I just started to realize that food is medicine. And I come from a family where there was not a lot of medication with the senior people in our lives. We just didn't do that. So it wasn't something that I was going to do. And that started to really make sense to me. And there was no good dog food. There was Calcan, this like fake rubber hamburger meat in a plastic bag, wrapped in like cellophane, or canned food. And then kibble came out. And that was worse than the canned food. It was like, and I just didn't feel good. So I continued to feed my food and start to look at at food as medicine for me. And so why not for them? None of my dogs are vaccinated. They never have been. They're all rescues. So I know they had some vaccinations. Um, my kids weren't vaccinated, and they were healthier than all their friends at school. My horses never vaccinated and healthy. So food is important. It's a huge, huge piece of the puzzle.
It really is. It really is. Thank you for sharing your journey with that too. We have a family friend who made the same decision that you did in terms of a cancer diagnosis, but she wanted to be able to get regular testing to make sure to kind of see where things were. So she partnered up with a doctor and said, I need you so that I can have access to the testing, but this is how I'm going to do it. And he was like, okay, I don't know. I'm not really open to this, but I'm willing to do it as an experiment with you. And he said to her, he's like, I cannot believe just the difference that the way that you're doing these things is making. And she would often have this conversation with my mom. She was a really good friend of a mom and like an of my mom and like an aunt to me. And she would say things like, I don't want to die before I've lived out my purpose. And we were like, look at the difference that you are making with changing this doctor who was so traditional and conservative and kind of towing the line that you get at medical school. His eyes were just totally open. And whether or not he actually then became somebody who recommended that route, it didn't actually matter. He was then open so that when more people came to him saying, I'm interested in this, he was willing to open the door for that.
Oh,
And
that.
so beautiful. And I think that that's very much the kind of perspective I take with all of this is I'm not interested in telling any one person with how they should feed their dogs or what they should do with their dogs, but I want to provide enough information so that people feel like they can make an appropriate decision that's
Mhm.
right for them and right for their dog and do what we were talking about before we started recording of acknowledge that power that you have within you instead of disempowering yourself and giving it away to experts, right? Like you make that decision for yourself and know that you can course correct, you can change your mind, you can explore, but to remove that fear from making
Yes,
decisions for yourself.
right, right. There's a great graphic that you'll get it. There's a split screen, right? So there's a line down the middle, and on this side, there's a bunch of dots, all different color dots. And it says that, and on this side, the same dots, but there's lines connecting them. And so this one over here is information, and this one over here is knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting the dots when you are dealing with so-called experts, it's not that easy because you have to discern. So I just tell people, listen to your gut. Does that feel right? Does it feel right to do this to your dog? Does it feel right to just throw kibble in a bowl? And are you aware that there's no oversight in commercial dog food? So that tells you something, but people don't eat that well themselves.
Mhm.
So they don't realize that they have to maybe make some different decisions. And then there's people who don't eat well for themselves and who will do anything for their dog and feed just, yeah, tell me, give me the recipe, I'll do it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then they kind of learn for themselves. But what your friend did and what I did with the doctors is what I do with when I'm vetting a vet. I'm going to come in and get a diagnosis, but I may not follow what you want me to do. Are you okay with that? And that's something that I try to help my clients be strong enough to do with their vet. I think
Oh,
it's
I love that. That's so important. That's so important. And to your point, to realize that they are there to give you information, but ultimately the decision is in your hands.
right.
Yeah.
But they're afraid because because they don't understand their dog, right? And the vet understands their dog less than they do, but they don't trust themselves, right? And then the
Uh,
vets don't take time to listen, right? And we know our dogs. When your dog is doing this, and this, and your vet's not listening to you, these things make a difference in a diagnosis.
100%. And I actually think from kind of the more spiritual perspective too. I've seen this with animal communication clients. I've seen it with my own dog. He's presented this to me that oftentimes dogs will manifest physical ailments as a reflection, as an opportunity for us to look at what's going on with
Yep,
us. That's
absolutely.
that's more common than we know.
Yes, I agree. I
Hmm.
absolutely agree with you. And they teach us in ways that we have no clue. And when we're open to it, why is she doing that? What can that behavior teach me and
Hmm.
and how it affects our relationship? What am I doing?
Exactly. I think that's a really useful jumping off point for thinking about and kind of deepening the conversation with you around how we start to understand what our dogs are communicating because it's a if we're taking that bigger lens, that wider lens on our dogs rather than I just need them to do this. I just
Mhm.
need them to be obedient. Other people are going to judge me if my dog is crazy on the leash. Other people are going to say bad things if my dog is jumping up, all of that kind of stuff. But if we can actually take that step back that you're offering us to look at what is going on and what are our dogs teaching us, what is a useful way for people to start engaging with this way of thinking and being with their dogs and looking at how they can better understand their dogs?
Simple. And it's so simple to get started with this, that behavior is a function of an emotion. So if your dog is behaving a certain way and you just kind of say, what's the emotion under that? What are they feeling that makes them do that? And then once you understand or can even look at that piece, what is my dog feeling? Like in order for me to do a Zoom, whether it's with you or a training Zoom, I can't have them running around being crazy. I have to be able to spend an hour on a Zoom call with somebody. So I make sure that their needs are met before. So I was busy doing some other things and some work related things this morning, and my 4-year-old Roddy got spilkas. It's like she had ants in her pants. She's ready to rock and roll. And I had already done what I normally do in the morning, but it was cool today. And she's like, I'm not done. So she's running through the house, like her butt tucked under and flying through the house, through the rooms, the carpet's going everywhere. And so instead of getting mad, most people would get mad at their dog and try to stop that behavior. You got to go, well, wait a minute. She's asking for something. What can I do? And so I went outside with them completely just distracted her from that energy. Let's go outside. And I said, you guys need to go potty. I took some treats out there and I did a little bit of training, like sit and, trick training. I did just like 5 minutes of trick training. And there's 3 dogs here. And then I came in and this is what we have.
Passed out.
Yeah. And so it wasn't that she was being bad, but that's how most people see it. And they yell at their dog and they tell him to stop. And then the dog is like, what? I just need a little bit more release here.
Mhm.
And I think if we can really stop and say, what is, what does my dog need right now? If they can constantly have that question, what does she need right now? Not 2 hours from now, but right now. And she's behaving in a way that we feel is inappropriate or we don't have time for. You're going to spend the best 5 minutes of your life distracting your dog to help your dog move through whatever that emotion is, shift that energy into something that is connecting. Your dog is not seeking attention, they're seeking connection. And so if they take that 5 minutes is so well spent to connect with their dog, as opposed to yelling at the dog, having the dog feel bad, and then do it again later or while you're in the middle of your Zoom because you didn't pay attention and help. And so the behaviors, reactivity, anything, jumping on the kitchen counter, barking, dogs learn that because we are not paying attention. And so when we pay attention and we manage the environment for them, not us, then they have room to go and make choices. They can go, oh, well, my dogs are, and sometimes I feel bad about this. It's like, and my kids would say the same thing. You know exactly what is going to happen next. And so Leela will, the puppy will be doing something and then she'll look at me and I go, really? Okay. All right, I won't. Well, you can have this instead. And so it's not, so when you're that aware of your dogs, there's still a lot of freedom there because I can be watching and just let her explore and choose and do what she's wanting to do, but she knows I'm watching. And I know, and this is something that most people don't really understand, I know that they're watching every move I make. Every move. From the direction of my feet to the shoes I put on to the clothes I put on, they know what's going on. And if we're
Yeah.
aware of that, who we're being, that's like probably 90% of the beginning of communication, being aware that they're watching us and that they're seeking connection, not seeking attention.
I think that's so huge. And I think it's actually a reframe that we're seeing in like gentle parenting circles, for example, with kids that are quote unquote misbehaving and actually reframing it to what they're really needing is connection. And so then that tasks us with rather than punishing or seeing them as a naughty child or a naughty dog, but actually looking at, so how can I facilitate this connection? That's almost like the follow-on question to ask ourselves, like, so how can I do that right now? And that actually is a really empowering question because it then gives you something to do, right? Instead of feeling like, I don't know how to deal with this dog that's going crazy. It's like, well, actually, what is something I can do to facilitate connection right now in
Yeah.
this moment?
Yeah, no, thank you. And because it is, we're seeing that something's underneath that behavior. We see that there's an emotion there that's causing that. And then we can say, what does my dog need? And then deeper, what can I do to help meet that need?
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. It also makes me think about, I think that in general, we are terrible listeners with our dogs and like with others. Like, I just think that that's sort of a trait that we have. And I remember when it was pointed out to me about the different types of listening, and it was like, oh my gosh. But in particular, asking ourselves the question, like, am I listening to understand or am I listening to insert?
Right.
And that same thing applies for our dogs too. Like, am I actually listening to understand what is going on with my dog, or am I listening with like, how do I stop this, or all of the conditioning that we're coming to this situation with, which is this is how a dog should behave, right? And I'm going to be judged according to that, all of that garbage. But are we listening to understand our dogs?
No,
Probably
we're not.
no.
No, because they're supposed to fit into our lifestyle. It's a different species that they're supposed to fit into our lifestyle, and that's just the way that it is. And that is not something that is anywhere near realistic for living with a dog. There's nothing real about that. And so, yes, they live in a human-dominated world. And so how can we help them be a part of that and not shut them down? And then you have people like Milan out there saying, just beat the shit out of him and excuse me, and your dog will behave, so and then people think, oh, he's calm, and I'm like, no, there's a difference between shut down and calm. This is a shut down dog, not a calm dog. So
Absolutely.
much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
And so I was in the middle of making a video with a professional who makes movies now. She's you would probably know some of the movies she's done. She's a friend of mine, and we were in the middle of making a body language movie, a
Oh.
video. And this was 15 years ago. And I would always look. The only book that was out was Barbara Aloff's book on dog communication. Um, and so we were midway through, and the entire time I was always looking on YouTube, always looking for, is anybody doing this? Is anybody doing this? And Milan came out with a body language video midway, and I thought, I can't compete. I don't have Nat Geo's money. I can't compete. So I stopped, and I was very, very upset about it because there was nothing like it, and it was so good so far. And did you hear about I think her name was Karen Dyer, the newscaster who was bitten by the dog in Denver?
No.
So a guy was walking his dog in Denver, and it chased a coyote over a lake. Coyote fell in, and the dog fell in after him. And he called the fire department, and the fire department got the dog out. And this was the whole thing, was on the news. And then they did a Good Samaritan thing on Good Morning Denver or some, morning show. And I watched it, and I watched the rescue. It was a cane corso, and the dog was, just struggling and bobbing, trying to get out, and it couldn't get out. And the fireman brought the dog out, set him on the ground, and the dog, was completely frozen, traumatized, and completely rounded over, tail tucked, and he walked away like this. And I got, oh, this dog's aggressive. This dog is could bite somebody. This dog is not social. Any other dog would have, even frozen, even traumatized, would have been yay and kind of crazy and trying to warm itself up. And so the next morning, they did a Good Samaritan thing on the news, and the fireman was sitting here, and the dog was the guy had his legs spread apart, and the dog was in between his legs, and he had a really thick collar on, really thick.
Mhm.
And the newscaster came over. I think her name is Kyle Dyer, Dyer. She came over, and so you got to figure the dog's in the studio for half an hour or so before this, in less than 24 hours. And the guy's whole guy has his hand in the collar, and Kyle comes over, and there's a video on this, a slow motion video on all the body language that happened before he bites her in the face. And I saw it all happening. And so do you know who Jennifer Shryock is?
Mm-mm.
She is the founder of Family Paws education, about teaching families their dog how to be with the new babies and toddlers.
Okay.
And so I called her, and I said, we got to do something here. We got to do a slow motion video. So she did it, and it's amazing. And I'll send it to you. So she comes over, and she's telling the story, and he's got his hand in the collar, and she's coming over, and she's putting her hands all over his face, and he's doing all of the signs like, get away or I'm going to bite you. And she's really close, and you see him go like this, that subtle. And as soon as he goes like this, because she's right here, the dog bites her in the face and, takes her lip off. And she runs away bleeding, and the show is over. And it's like that night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I said, I got to do something. I got to do something because people don't know how to read that. That dog did not want to bite. It showed every single body language to say, I don't want to bite you, but if you don't stop, I have no choice. And the owner had no clue. The owner did know his dog was aggressive, but he was in the limelight because he wouldn't have pull him back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He wouldn't have, said, oh, he would have said, somebody who knew their dog, I think you're too close, back off. He's not very comfortable. And so that night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought, an app. I'm going to do an app. That's easy. I know there's no body language app. I'm going to do an app. And that's how the app came about.
I love it. Divine download. Divine download that was kind of inspired by real life events, but being
Mhm.
right place, right time. And how much more effective long term is something like an app than Caesar Milan's video, right?
Right.
Putting it in
Right.
the hands of
I
people.
don't
Yeah.
even know that it ever came out. I don't know, but it didn't matter because I found somebody to do the app and the app came out and because it came out and, I was a nobody in the dog training world. Nobody knew who I was. And I started to blog, and then magazines started to call me and ask me to write for them. It's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But when I was promoting the app to people, trainers, big name trainers, they wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't give me the time of day. And then at the same time that my app came out, literally the same year the app came out, the book came out, Dogs Decoded. And we didn't know each other. We came up with the same, mine's Dog Decoder, theirs is Dog Decoded. And then now it's a referral.
I love it. I love it. For people who aren't familiar with the app, could you walk us through a little bit how that works and what it's actually doing? Because it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So there's three parts to it. There's the situation. So there's the pose, right? And then there's the information about it, the body language talking, and then there's a scenario just explaining what is happening. And I chose just 60 images, 60 of the most common images. And you know who Lily Chin is, the
Mhm.
illustrator. I contacted her and she did the illustration. She was great to work with because I think she called me once to say, what are you doing here? Because everything was so specific. I want the tail this way. I want the eyes looking this way, the head. And she did it all. And I think I ask her for one change. And the guy who built it knew nothing about dogs. So he was saying to me, in order to have this app be effective, you have to get way more succinct in your description. And I said, I don't know how to do that. And because he didn't know anything about dogs, he would ask me questions and we would get it right down to nothing, right down to just the essentials of what we needed to do. Yeah. So there's all, I figured I would start with 60 and then expand it over time. I never expanded it and it needs expansion. I mean, when I did the app, there were no even app commercials. There was no advertising for apps, and so now everything needs to be updated and every time there's a new phone that comes out, it needs to be updated for that. And I just haven't kept up with any of that, but it's still working for people and trainers and
Exactly.
shelters.
And
Shelters have it, and vets like Lisa Radasta has it. Some vets have it on a TV screen in the lobby. So and shelters so that it's just kind of swiping through as people are sitting and waiting, which is awesome.
it is awesome. It is awesome. And because it's so helpful for if people have heard of the Stop 77 campaign, which refers to like 77% of dog bites actually occur in the family to dogs that you know. And it is mostly because people are not able to read their dogs.
Right, right. And unless it's an obvious sign, and by that time, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like people, a growl is communication. Don't praise it, but acknowledge it. Your dog just told you, I've had enough, or told another dog, I've had it. They're good at learning from each other. Dogs are so good. If we leave them alone to interact when we understand them and know when and if we need to intervene, they read each other's body language, and the dog goes and raises their lip and says, okay, I don't want it. You can have it. It's communication, but we don't know how the lip licking, and you can even see from behind. You can see, you don't have to be right in front of your dog's face. You can see this. You can see the lips go up. You can see the tense body. You can see that they've raised up on their tippy toes now, but you got to know what to look for.
Hmm. No, absolutely. And it's really funny because the other day I was down like a YouTube spiral thing of things not related to dogs, surprisingly, but I was the etymology of words, because that's something else I really
Oh,
love too. I find it's just so interesting. But I was listening to somebody talking about the way that accents kind of develop, and they were saying that actually it's a bit of a misnomer to say that there is an accent because we think that everybody speaks in the same way. But he was saying that actually every single individual has their own unique way of speaking. And then we aggregate that and say, in this general area, this is like how an accent sounds is formed. But it made me think about the subtleties that you point us to with our own dogs. And actually, so you're showing here's some sort of generalized ways that dogs will express feelings, emotions, what the kind of next behavior could potentially be. But you also task us with getting to know our own dog. What is your own individual dog? So instead of like going from like this is the general accent, sure, and this is how my dog shows it. And so
yeah,
really watching the different situations that your dog gets pressured in and how they're responding to that
yeah,
and what are their little, like you're saying, it might not be the typical lip lick, for
right.
example.
Not at all. Maybe like this. That's a
Right.
lip lick.
Right.
And so with COVID, I moved in, I put everything in storage and traded my car, and I built out a little RV. And so I travel up and down the coast, and I've been doing it now 3.5 years. And I work with clients up and down the coast. When I started this, my Roddy was 9 months old. And so she'll be sitting in the front seat, which I made huge so that both dogs can be there. So there's something on the floor. So it's one big level bed. And if Timber, and if I wasn't as aware, it would be so hard for them to live in the van. So Lila will be laying down, and she gets up to look out. And then when she gets up, Timber gets up, the little one. And Timber lays down right in the middle of the bed. So now Lila's standing there. And I'm driving, which most people don't pay attention to their dog, but I look over and she goes like this. And she just looks at me, and I go, what do you need? And she just stares at me. And I said, okay. I pick up Timber, I move her while I'm driving because it's right here. And she lays down. She told me I can't lay down, Timber's here. Right. And then if she has to go to the bathroom, it's not hot. She's got the air conditioner blowing on her, and she's panting. So it's not fear. It's anxiety. Like, I gotta go. I gotta go. How many, what there's nowhere for me to go. Sometimes she'll hit the door, get off the, whatever, and hit the door. But that panting is her telling me I need to go to the bathroom.
Hmm.
And and that panting in the app will say that if they're panting when they're not hot, it's anxiety. But would they know that that is anxiety? That particular panting is an anxiety to go to the bathroom. It's not an anxiety of like, oh my God, a car went by and it made too much a loud noise. No, anxiety is huge. There's so many reasons your dog might be anxious, and they're not all bad, but
Right.
they're a communication.
Right. Right. No, it makes, as you're saying all this too, it just makes me rethink. I mean, again, it's that situation of like having compassion for the younger version of myself, or even like the past version, like last year or whatever. We're like, oh, I wish I'd handled that differently. But it is this acknowledgement of like the more and more I practice this and the more and more I become aware, the more I reframe actually Lucky's reactivity. And if I can actually reframe that as communication, he's just talking to me,
Yes.
right? He's engaging with his environment and telling me where his limits are, and
Mhm.
taking that label of a reactive dog off.
Yep.
And how does that then shift the way that I respond to the things, or I preemptively respond to things like, oh, there's a trigger. And the more I've been doing that, the more just even in recent weeks, it's been incredible to witness how he has actually befriended some of the, like, I have this joke that he's got a little telenovela going on with his girlfriends, that he's now got three girlfriends that he used to be terrified of.
Oh,
He would
and
bark
that's what
like,
you did.
yeah. And it was just like listening to him and seeing where his comfort zone was. And I also, some people say not to do this, but I do it. I talk him through situations. So I'll
You
tell,
should.
right? Like I feel like that's like I would say that to a person, right? I was like, that dog's really nice. That dog looks really nice, and that dog's on a leash, and she's not going to come up to you. Yeah, she's bigger than you. Yeah, she's really excited to see you, but you're okay. I'm not going to let her pounce on you. And the more I feel, anyways, the more I keep repeating that to him, the more he's been receptive to it. And now he's got three girlfriends. So,
Yeah, well, the talking to him is you setting a foundation of I've got your back, and that's trust. When a dog trusts you, they can overcome almost anything. It might take longer for some dogs to come through something that was pretty traumatic. And even if it wasn't traumatic, just, somebody barking at him when he was 8 weeks old, that was scared the shit out of him. And he had to, think, okay, I don't trust. But when he has your back and you are letting him know that you have his back by talking to him, it's communication, soothing communication, and not tightening up on the leash and not getting worried about it, is letting him know he can trust you, that you will have his back.
Mhm. Oh, thank you for that. That's really reassuring. Really.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of listeners who have reactive dogs can take that on board as well, because I think we get so stressed and frightened what's going to happen and all of that. But actually, if we can build that foundation of trust and reassurance with our dogs, I have seen that his reactivity drops.
it does. It does. And but we can say that we can, for every dog it's different. Excuse me.
Yeah.
For every dog it's different. So Leela was attacked at 9 weeks in my yard. A dog jumped over and got her. Same dog jumped over when she was 4 months old. So in the critical fear period of her puppy life, she was attacked twice. And so she became reactive on the leash. And she's 80 pounds. And so I knew that with both those attacks, I had a lot of work to do, and it was COVID, and people weren't out. And even if they were, they weren't socializing. So I would just say to people, can you at least just, if I toss you a treat, they wouldn't even touch a treat that I had in my hand. Because, and they remember there was a time when you couldn't even touch a dog, they might carry, from us giving it to them and on their coat. Um, so I said, then can I stand 6 feet away, 8 feet away? Can you just go, her name's Leela, can you just Goo talk to her? And so that was with people, with their dog. And so they didn't get to meet, but you have to get creative in order to help your dog. And that means you have to not be afraid to confront. You have to not be afraid to ask. You have to not be afraid to say, no, you can't pet my dog unless you have 10 minutes, because that's how long it's going to take her to feel safe. And people are afraid. And so when they hear from us that it's okay to be their advocate and say no, that it's really what your dog wants. They want you to say no. They're not comfortable. And then when you do, and they, or if you sit with me for 10 minutes, we'll just talk about anything else, and she'll lie down with your dog right there. And then there's ways that you can say, teach your dog, do you want to play? Do you want to play? Go play with Timber. Go play with that dog. They usually, if a dog is reactive, they usually have one friend.
Mhm.
And so when that friend comes over or you go there, I always say, go play, go play. So when you're working on other dogs that you're walking in the street, you can just say, maybe that dog wants to play. They know that word. It's a positive association. You're doing what you're doing. Well, that dog's not going to hurt you. Maybe it wants to play, but then you have to read that other dog's body language to see if that's an appropriate dog for your dog to meet. So there's so much. There's so much, and there's so many. It's nuanced. There's no method. It's all nuanced. And that is something that I think that humans have completely gone away from is read the room. They can't read the room for themselves with humans. How are they going to read it for their dog? It's so
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Well, it's because I agree with you. And I think a big part of it too is that we don't know how to be present anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big thing. And, we're constantly thinking about what is the next thing. Like I was saying, even about listening, like, are we listening to actually be present and understand, or are we listening, anticipating that we're going to have to say something in response?
Right.
And you receive two totally different things depending on which mode of listening that you're in.
Right.
And I just think that we're really being called like that. That's a big invitation that our dogs offer us, if we are open to it, is to be really present for them, for ourselves, for
Mhm.
others, and not constantly anticipate what am I going to have to do next? What's next? What's next? It's they will show you. They will
Well,
show you what's next.
they will show us, and it's what we love about dogs is the fact that they are present, but we're not connecting that dot. They are the most present sentient beings that we spend much of our time with.
Mhm.
And it's what we love about them, but we are unable to see that their ability to be present now is the biggest lesson that they can teach us, because that is the only way we're going to learn those nuanced behaviors that they give us.
Absolutely. Jill, if people want to download your app or learn more about it, what's a good place for them to go and find that?
iTunes and Google Play. Yep.
Perfect.
It's on both those. Yeah. And I also on the website, dogdecoder.com, I have a ton of blogs on there that people can learn from. And on Instagram, I do, have you seen my Instagram?
Hmm.
Yeah. And so it's memes that I get from my clients. Like I spend, an hour with a client, 2 hours with a client, and I come up with a meme, and then I explain what that is. But those I think are very educational because people can see themselves in it. It brings them in right away, and then if they want to, they can read the caption. Yeah, so
Exactly.
there's a lot in there. And then, if just Googling my name, there's a lot of articles in the whole dog journal and Dogster. I'm not doing Dogster sold out to just online. Um, so nobody's writing for Dogster. They have AI working for them now.
Oh man.
Kind of sad. We all got notice, editors, everybody that worked for Dog Decoder, we got an email, where we're no longer, everybody's fired in one email. It's like no one knew. So when I Google some of my old articles, it's got somebody else's name on it and it's changed. And I called them and I said, "Is this legal?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "But I signed a contract with Dogster and Belvoir, and my name is not on it. Same title. A lot of the core of it is my work, and then it's changed. Nothing I can do about it. Nothing anybody can do about it."
That is crazy.
Mhm.
That is crazy.
Yeah,
But again, like we were talking about before we started recording, we are at this real crisis point for really asking ourselves, who are we and what is the world that we want to be creating? And I think the whole AI conversation, obviously another conversation, but that is bringing up a lot of these same questions for us as we're
yeah,
at this juncture of a paradigm shift. And
yeah, yeah.
crazy, crazy.
I love that. I love how you think. I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate who you are for the doggy community and their people.
Oh, thank you, Jill. It's mirrored right back to you. Thank you so much for all that you have done and continue to do. You are such an inspiration. And I feel like we need to have more conversations because there's a lot of rich stuff to be talking about. And I think, as we've said throughout, we were talking before, but really taking the fear away from people
Yeah,
so they can step into their own agency. And you might start, it might be your dog that triggers that for you as the first way of doing that, but ultimately doing it for yourself as well and putting those puzzle pieces together for you as much as you are for your dog.
Right. They're teaching us things. We just have to be open to it. There's so much to learn that they have taught me so much over the years.
Well, I always ask my guests, and so it's kind of an appropriate time to ask you this.
Yeah.
What do you feel that your dogs have taught you about what it means to be human? If you could kind of sum it up or name a few things, what have they taught you about that?
What it means to be human in a
Hmm.
dog's world, or just what it means to be human.
Your
I
interpretation. You can take it either way you want.
Yeah, and so I think what it means to be human is to allow the learning, be open to I don't know it all, and that humans are. I always this is a joke. This is a joke that I always say I would maybe I should just get a lobotomy, right? Because the monkey mind, and when we shut that off, that's the human.
Mhm.
We don't have to learn, do, we just have to be. And I think what dogs have taught us is that ability to be present, and that there's something much greater than me. And I grew up, I know it all. And if somebody said, would you rather, what is that? Would you rather be right or be kind? And I would always say, well, both. But being right was a big thing.
Mhm.
And I think giving that up, because there's no way to be in a relationship with any species if you need to be right. And so being human means to give it up,
Mhm.
to surrender to what is available.
I love that. That's just so beautiful, so wise, and so perfect to end this conversation on. Jill, thank you so much for being here today. You're just such a gift. Your generosity of time and wisdom and spirit, I'm really grateful.
Oh, me too. And you too. It's nice to talk to a kindred spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me for my conversation with Jill Breitner. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to hear any takeaways that you might have. DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama, leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, or even reach out to me on my website, mysticdogmama.com. As Jill mentioned, her Dog Decoder app is available for Android and Apple products, and you can learn more at her website, dogdecoder.com. You can also connect with her on her Instagram at Dog Decoder. I highly recommend checking it out. It's such a useful tool for better understanding and connecting with your dog, and I've left these links in the show notes. If you are enjoying the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would consider liking, following, subscribing, and leaving a comment or a review. Not only does it mean the world to me to connect with you and hear what you're enjoying, it also helps the algorithm to put the podcast in front of more people so that we can continue helping other pet parents who are looking for some support and growing this beautiful community. I'd also love for you to reach out to let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast in order to better help you with your dog. Reach out to me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama, leave a comment, or reach out to me on my website, mysticdogmama.com. And if you're interested in becoming a part of a new community dedicated to helping you become your dog's health advocate, Stacy Renfrey of Hozo Hounds and I are launching our Fetch membership, which is designed to teach you the same holistic framework that we use in our canine nutrition and well-being practices, so that you too can confidently take control of your dog's health journey. Comment Fetch or DM me on Instagram or send me a message on my website, mysticdogmama.com, for more information. Okay, until next time.